Hello and welcome to a special edition of Artifacts. Artifacts is a show that talks about the arts in the Minneapolis area. We're standing here and we're going to be interviewing our guests in the City Council chambers in City Hall in Minneapolis. This, after all, is where city policy is made after discussions by our elected officials. With me are guests that are involved in a variety of projects throughout Minneapolis, and I'll be introducing them and hearing a little bit about what they're doing, and then we'll get into some issues about what it means when cultural facilities are developed. Our first guest is Laura Ayers, and you are involved with what project?
No-name exhibitions at the soap factory.
Right, and that's the whole name of your organization.
It is right now, yes.
It is right now. And where is the soap factory?
It's located at 110 Fifth Avenue Southeast. It's very close to the Stone Arch Bridge and St. Anthony, Maine. It's sort of sandwiched in between the two of
At the
them.
riverfront.
Yeah.
And very briefly, what goes on in there? What do you program in that space?
We focus on visual arts, and we like to see installation, photography, painting, mixed media, video, and wide range of every potential form of art.
Kind of the gamut there.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll come back a little bit later on that. Marge Maddux is with the University Dance Center, and you're part of a larger organization that I never remember the name of, and that is?
We're the dance program, which is part of the Department of Theater Arts and Dance.
Okay, and you're building a new facility as we speak.
It's on the West Bank, right down the street from Rarick Center, which houses theater, and Ferguson, which houses music. And the name of the building is the Barbara Barker Center for Dance.
And so this is going to eventually become part of a semi-arts campus over there,
Yes,
as it were.
that's what they're planning.
That's great. Brad Morison, you've been involved with cultural planning, cultural efforts, and particularly cultural facilities for a number of years. Most recently, the Schubert. What's been your role with that?
Well, I was a consultant to Maxfield Research, which did the feasibility study of the Schubert and the Mann theaters for MCDA, the Minneapolis Community Development Agency. So that was my role with the Schubert.
All right. And in years previous, I know you've been involved with looks at
11, 12 years ago, we did the study of the State Theater for the same organization. Mm-hmm. And then subsequently talked to them about renovating the Orpheum Theater as well.
Right. So obviously the buildings are historic, but now there's some new history with the development of these particular facilities as well.
Correct.
Okay. And Tim Peterson, you are with what until recently was called the New Franklin Cultural Center, which has a brand new name now. What is that called?
Franklin Artworks.
That's right.
The older name we inherited basically was a working title and didn't really reflect what our new mission has become, which is basically we'll be having a 115-seat theater and a 1,200-square-foot gallery side by side.
And you are doing this as a separate nonprofit?
Yes.
That's right.
We're our own entity.
Well, that's great. Let's open up the discussion a little bit about cultural facilities and how they fit into the communities that they're part of. Now, we've got a variety here. We've got some facilities that are smack dab in a neighborhood, a Minneapolis neighborhood. We have others that are part of an institutional setting. And, of course, anything downtown is sort of everybody's neighborhood, but exists in sort of a large dynamic of issues that come to large development issues, parking issues, transportation, and the like. Why are we seeing so many facilities right now? Anybody want to hazard a guess? Maybe we'll start with Brad.
Oh, that's a difficult one. I think the growth of arts activity in the Twin Cities over the last 30 years has been quite astonishing in many ways. And some of the increase, the development of new programs and new institutions are sort of coming to a head now, and everybody is at the point where they're looking for more space to do more things. Mm-hmm. And whether people are beginning to do too many things or not, I don't know. I have a suspicion that we may have too much art in the Twin Cities at the present moment.
And you say art specifically, or too many facilities for the arts?
No, too much art. Too many performances. I think we've reached a point where we may be saturated, mm-hmm. But that has to be taken into account when we're looking at facilities, because you have to keep in mind that the arts are about two different parts, artists and audiences, and the facilities bring them together to facilitate magic. And you have to take into account both how much art there is and how much audience there is, and how far you can push the envelope until you get to the point where there's saturation. I don't know whether we're there or not, but I suspect we're getting close.
Well, it implies that there's a risk to folks. And Laura, your organization, which I now know is 10 years old as an
Yeah.
organization, some few years ago decided, let's take the risk. What drove that decision? Why did No Name decide, yeah, let's make that effort?
Well, we acquired the soap factory as a donation, and the reason we wanted to take on this 48,000 square foot warehouse property and redevelop it is because we felt that as a small nonprofit arts organization with a very small annual operating budget and a very clear niche where we fit into the community, we wanted to make sure we could sustain what No Name does without becoming a bureaucracy of some kind. And we felt that if we owned the property and shared it with other nonprofit organizations, arts and cultural organizations, we would have a really rich dynamic of cross-pollination of audience members and creative staff and administration and just the people who come and either make things or partake of them. We felt like it would benefit us as an organization, and it would also strengthen the community. And we really like to see a very strong dynamic happening.
Well, at the university, many of us will remember that not too many years ago, the dance program was in jeopardy, and it's sort of risen phoenix-like from what might have been the end of its time. And here you are near the new millennium with the new building. Can you talk about how the university and your program pulled that out of the fire, as it were?
Well, the dance program has been around for a long time, but originally it was in the Department of Physical Education. And in the 80s, when there was a crunch for money, the Department of Physical Education decided that really the mission of the dance program was not the same as their mission. And so sort of threw us out into the wilds. And it was really through the efforts of Nadine Jetty-Sween, who was then head of the dance program, and people like Wendell Josel of the theater department, and Gertrude Livencott, Judith Bryn-Ingber, who really brought the theater department and the dance program together. And so not only, I mean, we think we came out on the better end of it, because this is where we felt that we were both performing arts, we belonged together. But really, our center is driven by a desperate need for us, for our classes, for our students. The actual performing area is one aspect of it, because we needed a performing area, you know, for our specific projects, even just for our small
Well,
showings.
and the reputation of your program really was outstripping the facility in which you could do it, as I understand it. And you
Right.
were
I mean,
well regarded.
We are in an old gymnasium.
Yeah.
But we have gotten an amazing amount of support from the community and also from the university.
Yeah, which would be necessarily so.
Right, and it's
Sure.
it's driven by, you know, people like Barbara Barker and Maria Chang, who was the past director of the program, who really sort of got the university people to sort of stand behind us. And also it was driven by the fact that the program kept sort of garnering awards and, you know, sort of being out there.
Justified it a bit.
Right.
Tim, you're in a somewhat different position, and I know you're relatively recent to the process here with this particular facility, but the neighborhood had a facility, underutilized, probably not utilized at all. How did it come into the community's decision to renovate it, spend some money, and make it useful?
Well, actually, it's a rather long history. I'll try to give you a quick overrun. It started as a neighborhood theater in 1916 as a silent movie house, and had a very, you know, mostly successful life through the 60s. It degenerated through the 70s and actually, you know, became an adult movie theater. At that point, the neighborhood really rallied to try to wrest this theater out of, at that time it was owned by Ferris Alexander, out of his hands, and make it a neighborhood, a place the neighborhood could use and be proud of. And eventually the city actually attained the building, and then several nonprofit entities tried to develop it solely with the idea of passing it on to someone else to operate, and they didn't have any success. We're the first organization that developed a nonprofit entity of our own with our own board of directors and said we're going to develop it and operate it. And this is about a 2-year-old effort right now, and we're very close to going to construction. I've been on the project for about 5 to 6 months now as the executive director. So the board did a great deal of work before I was hired to get it to this point.
And from what I understand, you're expecting to start programming in '99.
Yeah, I'm planning on opening in September '99, beginning of the art season. We're The construction will probably last 6 to 8 months, but I'm leaving some time at the end, hopefully to raise some funds to remove a false facade on the building, reveal the original silent theater.
Sounds exciting.
Yeah.
Well, we'll take a quick break right now, and we come back and we'll talk a little bit more about cultural facilities here in the Minneapolis area. And welcome back. We're sitting here with some guests talking about cultural facilities in the Minneapolis area. And actually the question comes up, can we have too many of these cultural facilities? And it gets back to audience and location and things like that. Brad, let's talk about centrality, where the arts are and where the people are that come to them.
Well, the Twin Cities are really quite unique. Quite unique is wrong. They are unique. In that there are a lot of very fine arts organizations, professional and non-professional, spread over a huge geographic area. And each of them has an audience that is defined in part geographically. And you have to relate the center parts of the city and what happens there to what happens all around and about the city. And you really have to understand in advance who your audiences are going to be and who your community is and where they're going to come from to know whether or not there's going to be enough audience to justify the development of the facility. And from the experience, my first love and my first involvement with the arts has been with audience development. And I did the first audience development work before any of you were born, so I've been working with audiences for a long while. And you really need to know when you're considering a facility whether or not there is an audience and whether there is a community that needs what it is that your artists want to do.
Well, and Tim Peterson, it would seem to me that you've had to wrestle with that because you are, by definition, a neighborhood facility, but you have sort of larger aspirations as to who you hope to come and take part.
Well, like the no-name exhibitions, we're blocks from downtown, but we are nestled in the Phillips neighborhood, which is underserved in the arts. It has some good art facilities. I don't want to say that Crearte is a new organization there, and but this is a big historic, probably the most historic and cultural building on the block of all of Franklin Avenue. So it's the neighborhood is at a great interest in seeing it reactivated.
Now, who are you hoping though that will come? Obviously, the folks in the neighborhood.
Yeah,
but is it your expectation people will come from Chanhassen or wherever?
I'd really like to do that. I'd really like this to be a premier alternative space in town. I'm focusing on doing one-person shows of people at transitions in their careers, from emerging to locally established, from locally established to to possibly getting some exposure outside of the Midwest. One of my goals is for artists is to tour shows out of the Midwest, and through the Jerome Foundation we're exploring doing that to some institutions in New York and taking shows back. I'm really hoping to really add some fertilizer to the local arts community and bring in the people who are stirring things up in some larger markets and get people who deserve to be seen in larger markets here.
And by doing that, then the expectation is then your facility becomes a destination.
Yes.
People go there
exactly.
because that's where it's happening.
That's my roundabout way of getting there. Yeah, I really hope that it becomes that very quickly. That's the gallery's mission. The theater will be leased for the first year. We'll probably begin doing our own programming, and that will be showcasing the dance, theater, music from all over the cities, as well as from groups based in Phillips, who deserve to be seen from people all over the city. So I'm really expecting it to become a destination.
Marge Maddux, the university, it would seem, sort of has the opportunity at least for a built-in audience. And as you said, part of what drove this is the need for space to teach.
Yes.
So you get your students there. Who else do you think is going to come here? Or did that not fit into the mix? Is it incidental that there was space available on the West Bank, or is the West Bank part of your intended audience?
I think the West Bank is, I mean, the actual community is part. I mean, we really want to be community friendly with our building. But also there are, we feel that because there are dance facilities that are closing, for example, Space Base, that there is a need for a space our size at a reasonable rate. And so even though initially we will not be renting space, you know, as far as, the performance space, we would like to be able to. Mm-hmm. But we also have a lot of need for that space through the department with our theater students. We're doing a project this spring with theater and dance students. Hopefully more collaborations with music.
Interesting. So you're really cheek by jowl there with Rarick Center, Ferguson Hall, Ted Mann, the Catherine Nash Gallery isn't far. Do you think that this will have more of an influence on sort of cross-disciplinary activities than you've been doing before?
Well, absolutely. The dance program now is on the East Bank. It's on the other side of the river. But we're still trying to do things, but as soon as we get on the other side of the river, we'll just make it for our students in particular.
There you'll be with all these other
Absolutely.
opportunities. Laura Ayers, No Names moved into a building that I guess if you hadn't moved in, who knows what would have happened to it. So this gave you in particular an opportunity to reuse an old building. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, it feels wonderful to be reusing an old building and bringing it back to life and having so much presence as a result of it's about 10,000 square feet on the ground floor where we program, and giving so much free rein to the artists who've been able to come in and install their work. And having a site like that is very interesting for the audience. All the feedback we've received has indicated that. It's been curious to me that our audience has continued to grow over the years and to diversify. Initially when No Name started, it really was a place where people came by on the art crawl, or they were always into the arts. They were personally very invested in the arts. And now the audience that comes to see the work there has grown to people who appreciate the arts, but maybe it's not their primary focus in life. And the age range is very broad, and I think that's good. I think it's a good question. Can we have too much art going on so that we don't have an audience, that the audience will be oversaturated? I think it's a great question, and it's one that we wrestle with. But I think that as the organizations have relationships with each other and the natural audiences that come to them have relationships, the education that happens with the audience, they get introduced to new art forms and the dynamic creative process that's happening in the variety of art forms, that the cultural appreciation in the Twin Cities will grow even to a more advanced level than it already is. That would be my hope.
Brad?
I think we have to be very realistic about the geography of audiences and who will come and who won't come. And I think I admire people with great vision and the passion for them. But I also think that one has to be very realistic. And if you look at for instance, the Jungle Theater, Bain Belke, who is the artistic genius behind that, will admit quite freely that his audience is all from South Minneapolis. And I think if you look at the audience at the Chanhassen Dinner Theater, it's all Southwest Minnesota. I'll bet that very few people come from White Bear to the Chanhassen Dinner Theater. And we once did a study for the St. Paul Chamber Orchestra that showed that attendance fell off drastically after 6 miles, that you had a real bell curve, and the frequency of attendance started high, and when you got to 5 or 6 miles away, it dropped way off.
Does
And
that
I think
mean
vision is wonderful, but we must be realistic when we start plowing money into facilities about where the people will come from.
Does that mean then that we should have an arts facility, a visual arts, a dance arts, theater arts, music in every community so that all those communities are served since people don't travel that far?
Well, that's the great dilemma about too much art. If you start building facilities and trying to develop artistic activity all around this huge metropolitan area, it's going to be divisive, and you will have little pockets of art happening and no cross-fertilization. And I think that one of the great functions that the Schubert could perform would be as a showcase for all of these organizations that do good work around the Twin Cities to once in a while be able to perform in a central location. The problem with downtown Minneapolis is it's so user-unfriendly that it's not a very good place to put arts facilities or arts organizations anymore.
We're going to take another quick break, and maybe when we come back, we can talk about who makes decisions about where these facilities should be developed and how we make those decisions. Stay tuned. And we're back, and we're talking with Tim Peterson from Franklin Artworks, Marge Maddux from the University Dance Center, Laura Ayers with No Name at the Soap Factory, and cultural maven Brad Morison.
Twice you used it.
I know. I get a couple shots to do every once in a while. Well, we've started to talk about how do we get people here? Are we making the right decisions? Are we making too many assumptions for getting people to our facilities in order to make them thrive and survive? Who should be making these decisions? I mean, obviously, from No Name's point of view, you identified a need that you felt you could corral within your own organization. Did you feel that you were out hanging on the edge of the cliff without any context to make that decision?
No, before we undertook this building and its redevelopment, we worked for about a year and a half to establish whether there was a need in the community for sharing space and whether there was a need in the community for the work that we were showing, to continue. What we have found is that there are both. Of course, we're not a huge facility. 48,000 square feet is large, but it's not a huge programming space all in one fell swoop. It's 3 different floors. It could be office space and classroom space, and exhibition space for others, and performance space even. But there is a need to serve nonprofit arts organizations that don't have huge budgets and to have affordable lease rates for them. And in terms of the visual work that we focus on and the flexibility of our programming, there's a need for that too. No Name Noise is something that one of our volunteers came up with and has curated for the last 2 years, and has is hoping to collaborate with the Walker a little bit. But he's brought in music and alternative music, experimental music, composers who are from as far away as Japan. And there's a particular niche of people who have already identified this as a valid and very exciting art that they want to partake in. And it's our expectation that as it happens more and more, an audience will develop as they hear about it from their friends. I mean, in a very personal manner, that's how the arts touch us. And so if there is that opportunity for exposure, you can grow, and artists and audiences can grow. But I appreciate the idea that you can only be in so many places at a time as an audience member. You can only go to so many places a week. You can only go for so many hours. You can only afford so much money if they charge. And so there is a potential maximum that you could hit. But then again, there are lots of people that don't participate in the arts yet. And so as they become more credible and more personally engaging, I think that we can yet see some growth.
So I
in the
take it
arts
you're
community.
bullish on developing audiences.
Yeah.
You are. Brad, are you more pessimistic?
I'm not very optimistic about going very much further. I think there is a limited number of people in any community who are potential participants in the arts as audience members, either for the visual arts or for the performing arts. We used to refer to them as the yeses, maybes, and the nos, and the ineligibles. That in any community you have those 4 categories of people. The yeses are the people who automatically go to everything. You send them a mailer and they'll buy a season ticket. The ineligibles are people who are too old, too young, incarcerated, or incapacitated, aren't.
Well, now some of us have performed in Stillwater.
Well, I'm talking about people coming to you rather than
getting
taking
in a
the
car
art to
and coming
people.
over to your
The
facility.
no's are people who, for one reason or another, simply have shut out the arts and will never be, in the immediate future, possibilities. Maybes are people who are in between the no's and yeses who will try something, and if it doesn't hurt too much, they may try it again. And our research over the years has shown that the yeses are about 3% of the population, the maybes are about 12% of the population, that the no's are about 50%, and the rest of them are ineligibles. And no matter what you do, it is very difficult to push beyond a basic group of people of no more than 15% who are even potential to participate. And it's very difficult to push on and develop that core anymore. What you have to try to do is make yeses out of maybes, and occasionally, if possible, make a no into a maybe. But it's very tough, and there's a limited number of people that you can draw on, and you can't get beyond that. All you can do is try to get the yeses and some of the maybes to come more frequently. And you have to be realistic about that. We cannot go on having these great visions of
and I
arts
think
for everyone.
that's where the issue of the economics of arts comes into play. Because one of the things that keeps people not participating is when it's not viable or they can't afford to. And so I know that people look at that in many different organizations, and the higher ticket something is, a baseball game, the higher the ticket is, the fewer attendees you're really going to have who can also afford to bring their children, let's say. And then if they have to pay a lot of money for dogs and pretzels when they're there, it drives away the audience. So I think that the affordability of art is always an issue, and it goes into in hand with how people value the arts.
Well, and then how it's subsidized and where the money comes from in terms of earned income and subsidy. Tim?
Well, ours, I'm in a favorable position in that most of the established institutions in town try to pull the people from the Phillips neighborhood, in particular, to their institutions. I'm bringing the art to them. The only people I generally need to attract are the people who love art and don't live in Phillips. So it's not to say that people in Phillips don't love art, but I'm bringing, showcasing their art, showcasing the art from the cities and everything. So I really feel I'm going to attract a new audience to art that's in my immediate neighborhood.
When you say new audience, though, you're talking about really the yeses that Brad's talking about,
I'm
folks
talking
who
about
love
some
the
of
arts
the
but
no's.
have not been coming. Oh, and some of the no's.
I'm talking about the no's in my immediate neighborhood.
Okay.
The Franklin Theater is centrally located. It's very obvious. It has its own parking. It's street friendly. There's street traffic. I really expect to find people poking there. It'll slope down after the first year, but I really do expect to attract those people.
As well as the
As well as the
arts-friendly
people who
folks from
love it.
outside.
Yeah,
That
within
might
and without, yeah.
When you talk with funders, because you have a challenge to raise some money to do this,
Yeah.
are they asking you some of the same questions that we're hearing around this table, like where are your people coming from? Or are they more interested or only interested in the programming? I mean, what do you think's going on in their minds to understand if they think what you're about is going to work?
Well, they're mostly very excited in that we're looking at not at replicating someone else's artistic programming within Phillips. They're interested that we've been looking at the entire city and figuring out what's missing. The Walker used to do one-person shows, and they were probably the only place that did it fairly consistently. And most places like So Factory do group shows fantastically. We have a very small gallery. 1,200 square feet is small for a group show, but fantastic for a solo exhibition. And that's what's missing. So the people who fund visual arts are just excited that we're offering an opportunity that doesn't exist. With the idea of touring shows, again, that isn't being done. We don't have a gallery system that does that, and the Walker doesn't tour the shows they create of local art. So I'm getting people to saying, finally someone's doing this. Which is exciting. It's fun. It's wonderful to have that affirmation at this stage. I hope it continues all the way through.
Marge Maddux, for generations, the university is where people in certainly the Twin Cities and the upper Midwest went for culture. I mean, there was a time when that's where you went. You went to Northrop Auditorium to see the old Minneapolis Symphony. And other convocations and concerts were put on there, and that was sort of it. That's where it happened until Orchestra Hall was built and the Minnesota Orchestra developed there. Does the university think about, and I realize maybe you can only speak from your particular experience, but does the university think in a large sense, an overview of what they're about culturally with facilities? I mean, the Wiseman isn't that long since it's been built. For a long time, that was nestled up in the third floor back halls of Northrop.
I think they do. I think that it goes along with their new sort of community outreach and to a certain extent in-reach, in that they want to be user-friendly, much more so. It's not sort of behind these walls. And so with the Weissman, with Northrop, with the Ted Mann, even more so than a lot of other things, with Rarig, with the 4 theaters that we have in Rarig.
Well, and you've got some news too with a venerable institution at the university, the Showboat,
Right.
which has sailed down the river a little bit.
Right, the Minnesota Centennial Showboat, which has been sort of, was condemned a few years ago, and they've been really pretty much trying to raise funds, with the university in the community to have it renovated. It will be renovated and available or open the summer of 2000, probably in June of 2000. It will be moored at Harriet Island as part of the Harriet Island complex. And that's another one of these, it will be going out to reach to the community. The shows that have traditionally been done on the Showboat will be a product of that boat, but also they would like to make that space available to the communities, the South St. Paul community. So it'll be for more than just theater.
So that'll be a millennial event.
Yes, absolutely.
All right.
It's exciting.
Folks, stay tuned. We're going to come back and have a little more discussion about cultural facilities here in the Minneapolis area. Stay tuned. And welcome back. Certainly when we talk about cultural facilities here in Minneapolis, if we look at it from the inside out, we get very excited. Those of us that live and work and certainly partake of the arts as fervently as I know all of us around this table do, it's exciting. And other things coming online at the university and other facilities being saved in Phillips or along the riverfront. And of course the partisans for the Schuberts are legion. I mean, people care about that building a lot. But if we look at it from the outside and we say, well, gosh, there are a lot of these facilities there, and more coming on. It seems, just about everybody seems to have a signature building in mind here. Where should the discussion be going on? Brad, earlier you said that the university, for instance, ought to be looking at, when they decide to do a facility, who's going to show up. What's the overview? From what vantage point should this discussion be having? Should the arts community build some leadership, establish a think tank, or how do we make these decisions?
Well, I believe, as I said before, I believe in visionaries. I often say when arts organizations complain to me about not having enough money, I will say, you give me a vision and I'll find you the money. This country has far more money than it has vision. It's not very difficult to get money if you have a vision. And I think that we have to remember that a cultural facility never created any art. Artists create art. And if you have a visionary artist of genius, the facility will be built to serve that artist. And we must not think that if we build cultural facilities all over the place, that we are going to get art in them or audiences in them.
Well, point taken, but who says that this is the last one through the door? I mean, where do we decide? I mean, should the city council be developing a cultural plan for Minneapolis?
Well, let me ask you the question.
Or the state of Minnesota?
In any given community, there is a certain fixed amount of money and a fixed amount of audience and a fixed number of artists, although artists can move in. But you have a limit on how much art there can be successfully in any given community, which is limited by money, artists, and audiences. Now, what are you going to do? Are you going to say when you get to the limit, we're going to pass legislation and ordinance that says no new arts organizations can start? No. If you're going to say you can have new arts organizations and there's a limit, then you must finally admit that arts organizations have to fail. And we must stop thinking that every institution that starts has to be perpetuated, because that can't be.
Good point. Tim Peterson, let me ask you this. You're obviously a Borning now. I mean, this is an exciting project. You've got a great vision for it. It's well articulated. You've got at least the money in the pipeline to get what I'd call the first phase done. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
How will you measure success?
Well, there's a couple ways. The artist community is tremendously excited about having this opportunity to be seen outside of a group show environment, to be just have people come in and just see their work in all of its variety. So there's that success, and I've already found that. I've got people pounding down my door. With community success, I'd like to see the neighborhood really turn out in force. I'm planning on doing, each summer doing what I'm calling a Phillips series, where I'm either commissioning work about the neighborhood, doing a show of somebody from the neighborhood, or a collaborative project where an artist from somewhere else is working with teens, and I'm hoping that really brings in people. But particularly in the summer, but all year long. I'd like to see people from elsewhere detach the stigma that Phillips has, which is probably the largest hurdle I have to face right now. Fortunately, all of Franklin Avenue is being re-landscaped, redone. Streetscape is being redone. The city is really putting an effort into making this a main street, with us really being, the crowning jewel and it being the largest structure on it. So that's the main hurdle is people coming in who have an unnatural fear of this neighborhood.
Fair enough. Marge, I know that when the university and your program in particular started talking about a new facility on the West Bank, that you had discussions with folks in the West Bank. And I know for a fact that your staff, your faculty are linked with the dance community, which is another constituency. Mm-hmm. But can you outline for us a little bit how those discussions went, or were they formal, informal? How did you all decide that what you needed to do for your own purposes would fit in with sort of the greater need in the dance community?
Well, I think that our first and foremost need was safe space. So, you know, we are in Norris Hall, which is a old gymnasium. It's a terrible space at this point in time. And so what we were really designing was a space for our students that was safe. Then the architect for this project is Joan Serrano of HGA, met with me and we talked about dance. You know, sort of looked at our facilities and what the students needed. She knew what spaces we needed. And she designed a building that really speaks about what dance is all about. So from that standpoint, it was really from our relationship with the community is to say, this is what dance is all about. This is what this building is going to look like, what dance is all about. But it also speaks to our students who are another set of constituents about the fact that we're giving you this building and this is this creative building and we expect that you will respond to the building as well. So it's not just a performing space, it's also an act, you know, the artists will be developed within this space. So it's pretty exciting. The community, the university community was an easy sell, but the actual Riverside, Cedar Riverside community, Cedar Riverside has always had dance in its community. I mean, this is where Nancy Hauser was for years, Lois Holton, there's the Southern Theater there. So to a certain extent, we had a lot of support there. And they basically, we are the head of the arts, quote, area of the university. We're the entrance into the university on Riverside. And it's a pretty dramatic, it'll be a very dramatic.
From an urban design point of view, I mean, you're literally the gateway into that sort of arts campus we were talking about earlier. And the West Bank area, though, much like downtown, has parking issues. That's a big challenge over there, too.
But it's a little bit different. I mean, there is a lot more on-street. And like, for example, Augsburg has parking in the evenings. They're building ramps. I mean, parking is a problem, but I've never had trouble going to the Tedman or to Rarick and without finding a place to park, as opposed to the East Bank, which is much more difficult.
Good point. Well, Laura, I know you have a political bone or two in your body. How would you assess, not necessarily only from the no-name point of view, but the folks that have to sit in a chamber like this, at a city level or at a metropolitan area level or the state level? Is it your sense that the decision makers, certainly from the public policy point of view, understand the arts agenda, or are they driven more by other agendas, development, marketing, raw neighborhood politics? And we'll get to you in a minute, Brad. I think he's got something to say. I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but to me, it seems that the public is engaged with the arts. And do you think our political leaders are learning the language more, or not enough, or what?
Well, I think that arts dialogue happens on any number of levels. And when you're talking about the arts, when you're talking about artists creating work, that's one conversation. But the impact of that work being created and the impact of that activity taking place is where the neighborhood dialogue, the economics, redevelopment, you know, adaptive reuse, philosophy, all of those things start coming into play. And I think that the elected officials look at art definitely from those exterior angles, and some of them probably, and a personal, you know, have a personal relationship with what they think art is and what it should be doing in the community, or whether it is even something for the community, whether it's just personal for the artist and whoever happens to see it. You know, they may have their own philosophical viewpoints. I think they balance all of those, though, the economics, the redevelopment, the role of the neighborhood, and those kind of connections.
It's one of the exciting things I think about public policy is that I always often liken it to orchestration. I mean, you've got a lot of sections playing at the same time, and at the same time you have to help conduct that. Brad, do you have any comments about leadership on this?
Well, I just want to go back to my basic position, I guess, that it is a magical vision of an artist that should drive all art. And there is no other reason for a facility, the cultural facility, other than that it is a place for audiences and artists to come together and make magic. Cultural facilities are not about downtown rehabilitation, economic impact. The greatest single mistake we've made in the arts in this country over the past 4 years has been to justify arts on grounds other than the fact that they are the essence of life. And we have fallen into an enormous trap of justifying art on the basis of it helping kids to learn something else, or helping to revitalize downtown, or because of its economic impact. And we have to stand our ground and say that we need art, and we need artists, and we need facilities, because it is about the essence of civilization.
And I think that if you've got the percentage of people that are drawn to the arts automatically, and they're the yeses, you can count on them, but the no's, the maybes, and the not able to get there for some reason or another can enter the arts through another avenue. And it may be because they decided it was a good way to redevelop a community, and then they started coming to see shows, and then their appreciation for the arts became personal. And I wouldn't close any doors to the way that people access the arts, but I do agree with you that you can't minimize what the arts are by saying they're an excuse to do something else. They are intrinsically valuable in and of themselves.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it sounds like sometimes the issues of means and ends get inverted here.
Absolutely.
That the art, you're saying the arts ought to drive it.
Yes.
Okay. Well, folks, I want to thank you all for a good discussion. Obviously, there's more. There are nuances to this, and this discussion should continue. Brad Morison, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Laura Ayers, pleasure.
Thank you.
Marge Maddux, good luck with the new facility. It opens when?
At the end of March.
Of 99.
1999.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And Tim Peterson, programming starts also in 1999 for Franklin Artworks.
Yep, in September.
Thank you for being here. Great. Well, we hope you've learned a few things. I hope you enjoyed this edition of a special edition for Artifacts. If you have any comments, you'd like to learn a little bit more about what we talked about or the people that are on this show, call the City Cable 34 hotline. That's 673-2234. I'm Phill Lindsay. We'll see you next time on Artifacts.